Please wake up! Don't leave me alone!
It felt like I'd never left Bittersweet Apple Hell. After I'd realized that everything that had kept a smile on my face and my life as bright as the sun had left me alone and lost. Reality became a blur in my screams of a hopeless and inevitable conclusion. And from that moment onward, the old Flora Bloom had faded away, replaced with the lifeless husk now rotting away in this shithole. Everything that had kept me stable and robust had collapsed. And back then, I'd become a bridge destined to crumble apart into whatever lay beneath it. Everything bright in my life had faded to nothing but a desolate gray. And my mentality, already scarred by that apple bitch, had become unhealable. The wounds bleeding like a raging waterfall of crimson. In full clarity, my life had, in one lone night, gone from happy and carefree to dystopic and unhinged. Something I hadn't felt since the day my mom and I ran from him. Oh, you must be wondering who I'm talking about, seeing as I never mentioned it before Hoof. Well, there's a reason for my lack of mentioning the stallion who literally destroyed my foalhood. And that's because I buried that bastard in the darkest corner of my mind long ago. To put it in the lightest of descriptions I can manage, the stallion I speak of is the very one that violated me at only the age of 5 and beat my mom as if she were his own personal punching bag. The stallion known as Darwin Flair, aka my father. But that whole nightmare is another horror story for another time. The only thing relevant about that monster is that he was the cause of my imbalance before Sarah, Trevor, or Henry were ever even a thing in my life. For the longest time after Mother and I managed to escape him, the scars he'd left continued to fester with pain and trauma. I didn't go anywhere, talk to any pony, or just socialize in any manner in general for months. Up until the day I met Sarah for the first time. To keep it brief, Sarah understood my pain because she'd been through something similar in her past. That's how we connected. And eventually, our friendship would lead to me healing and letting go of the past. It took a long, hard time to finally move on. But my friends all helped and supported me along the way. They were like the siblings I'd never had, and we all understood each other, carrying our own baggage that lingered like an incurable virus or disease. We all weren't just your ordinary group of friends. We all had connections through things connected to our past, and worked together to free one another from those things that haunted us by showing that there is light in the darkness. Trevor's demon was drug addiction, nearly losing his life to an overdose. He had grown up around said demon and had been led to think that drugs were nothing bad, seeing his parents were constantly poisoning their bodies with them. Then came the night he had shot up something beyond his usual dosage, leading to immediate negative effects on his body. Somehow he had managed to save himself in time by dialing 911 and alerting the operator of a situation. He was taken to the hospital and cured of his poison, having escaped death by less than 5 minutes' time. I don't know how his parents were able to keep him, but Trevor had vowed from that day to turn his life around. Henry's demon was suicide, having been driven to the point of no return by the school staff doing nothing to stop the bullying he received daily in and outside of school. However, once it had come to the moment of ending it all, he couldn't do it, and realized that ending his life wasn't the answer. He came out of that horrifying situation a stronger pony, and refused to ever let his demons take over him again. There were a few occasions where he had nearly lost his strength, but Sarah, Trevor, and I managed to keep his head above the dark sea he was starting to sink into. Together, we worked to keep each other strong and stable. We'd been through hell and had managed to escape, turning our lives around in hopes of a second chance. So, when I lost them and Mom, I lost myself in the crumbling of everything that had kept me above my own personal sea of dread.
The room Flora sat in was cold and unwelcoming, consisting of only thick walls, a hard floor, and one lone table she was currently seated in. Her eyes were bloodshot and swollen from the previous night and horrid discovery that she had found only 2 hours prior, her screams of anguish and desperation having been loud enough to alert neighbors. They had found Flora weeping on the floor, her mother's corpse immobile and pale on the couch and cold to the touch. It was a sight that had horrified the ponies who had come to her aid as much as it had Flora, following with a call to the Ponyville Police Department. Upon arrival, the house had been swarmed with police and barricaded with crime scene tape. Flora had refused to leave the premises, but was eventually taken out by force, allowing the officers to do the proper actions of investigating the crime scene for anything related to the cause of death to Lily Bloom. Due to her refusal to cooperate, Flora had been hoof-cuffed and locked in one of the cars. She hadn't been under arrest, just temporarily restrained to allow the police to do their job. Next to arrive had been the homicide unit, a stallion dressed in a black trench coat making his way into the house with heavy focus and analyzation of every area outside of the residence. He did the usual protocol upon entering the horrid scene, eyeing Lily's body and everything around the area for any solution to the cause of her death, but the only possible thing he could find in relation to anything to do with the crime scene was the empty wine bottle on the carpet floor. No blood, weapon, or sign of forced entry. From that, he had concluded his analysis, allowing the coroner to lead the body from the house to the Canterlot morgue. However, that wasn't all he planned to do. Having exited the house, walked over to the car Flora had sat in, and opened the door to speak with her.
Good day, Miss Bloom. I'm Detective Blackhorn, and if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to come down to the station. You're not under arrest. I'd just like to ask you a few questions regarding the situation.
Flora had just lifted her head to meet Blackhorn's gaze, knowing it had been best to just comply. She had seen enough crime shows to know that refusal to comply only makes you look even more suspicious than you seemed prior, so she had just responded with a light nod.
Thank you for your cooperation. Sit tight. We'll be leaving shortly.
After a short ride, Flora had been escorted to where she currently sits in a blank state. Between losing her friends to that psychotic mare and her mother dying out of nowhere, she felt as if all of the light in her life had burned out, and now she was just trapped in a labyrinth with no way out or light to lead her. She felt empty, lifeless. Upon the sound of the door across the room opening, she shifted her gaze and jumped in mild fright. Through the door came Detective Blackhorn, closing the door behind him and taking a seat across from Flora. She felt as if she were in one of those cheesy crime dramas being interrogated, and upon Blackhorn laying his hooves upon the tabletop, it was practically exact. All that was missing was an ashtray and a ton of folders with documentation of the victim. She was just waiting for him to pull out a cigarette, but he never did, and instead began to address the reason he had brought her here.
First, I'm very sorry for your loss, Miss Bloom. It truly must have been quite a shock finding your mother deceased, but that's why I'm here.
Flora didn't say anything, only nodded her head in response.
Alright, so, let me ask the first question. Do you know any pony that would want to hurt your mother? An ex-boyfriend? Co-worker? Friend?
Flora shook her head instantly. Lily wasn't one to make enemies, nor did she really have any friends who had a gripe with her. Blackhorn nodded, pulling out a mini notebook and pen from his left chest pocket and scribbling some notes into the first blank page steadily.
Alright. Question 2. Where were you between midnight and 5 a.m. this morning, Miss Bloom? I know the answer is pretty obvious, but I'm required to ask these things for confirmation.
Flora took a moment to answer, her mind still stained with all of the horror of last night and that morning. Her mind echoed the screams of her friends in their final moments, the laughter of that sadistic mare, and Henry's dying wish. But she found her answer through all the traumatic imagery and sound.
I was out at the festival.
Her voice came out as a trembling whisper, but upon Blackhorn scribbling furthermore in his notebook, it was clear he had heard her.
Very good. Question 3. Were you with any pony at the festival?
Again, Flora hesitated, but after a minute, she found her answer.
My friend, Henry Quickwit.
The screams echoed again, Blackhorn scribbling more notes down.
Okay. Question 4. What time did you leave the festival with your friend?
Flora paused. She had to be careful here, because she could easily be caught in a lie. She couldn't tell the truth, nor could she say she hung out at Henry's house for a while. His parents would have seen her arrive and stay. The near entirety of Ponyville was out last night, so many eyes would have seen her at the festival, as much as leave it. She thought about the way she left to go to the Foundation, and assumed she could say that she went to meet up with a friend or something for a better view of the blood moon. The road to the Foundation is across the bridge and to the left, so she could say she went to meet a friend out that way, seeing there is an actual open field with a good view of the night sky just across the bridge. It was her best resort, so she went with it.
I went outside of town, across the bridge, to meet with my friends. We wanted a better view of the blood moon, so we went out that way.
More scribbling followed, along with Blackhorn sticking his notebook into one of his many coat pockets.
Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Bloom. You've been a great help.
He said calmly, standing up from his seat.
But there still lies the fact that you're without a guardian and are not of adult age. Therefore, by law, we cannot just let you go until we are certain that you have an adult guardian caring for you. Not to mention your home is currently a crime scene, so you cannot go home just yet.
Then, where do I go?
Do you have any family that can provide for you, Miss Bloom? A grandparent? Uncle? Aunt?
Flora paused. The last time she'd ever seen one of her relatives was before she had moved to Ponyville and was old enough to remember, and her mother had never mentioned anything to do with her grandparents, so she had no idea. She just decided to lie.
None that I am aware of.
I see. Well, then do you have any trusted friends who could temporarily care and watch over you?
Sparks instantly burst in Flora's head, her only friends having met their grisly demise the night prior. Tears instantly started to soak her tear ducts. But given her situation, she fought them back and brainstormed some fake story up in her head. She couldn't say she didn't have any friends due to her statement of being with Henry the previous night, so she came up with a not too untrue answer.
No, sir. Because my friends have been missing since during the blood moon last night.
Blackhorn's eyes widened. Even he wasn't expecting that answer.
What do you mean, Miss Bloom?
We all were watching the blood moon last night, and after it was over, we all were planning to do some last minute trick-or-treating. However, after the event was over, all three of them were gone. I spent all night looking for them within the area and had no luck. So I was going home to call the police to report the missing. That's when I found my mother.
Blackhorn cleared his throat, regaining his calm composure. This case of murder had now become a missing case as well, and he was nowhere prepared to find 3 more potentially dead ponies.
I see I've underestimated the severity of this.
He said, taking a seat again and pulling the notebook from his breast pocket.
Can you give me their names, Miss Bloom? I'll see to it that a party will be formed to search for them.
Sure. Trevor Trotsman, Henry Quickwit, and Sarah Darkmist.
With a click of the pen and new scribbles on the blank paper canvas, Blackhorn finished the session, slipping the notebook back into its home of cloth and cotton and turning to the door.
Thank you again for your cooperation, Miss Bloom. For now, just stay put. My fellow colleagues will arrange something for you shortly, given you're probably hungry.
What about my temporary home?
We'll arrange something until the crime scene is cleared. My fellow friend, Officer Darkwood, will be just outside the door if you need anything. Just don't be afraid to ask.
Flora nodded, to which Blackhorn took as a sign for him to depart, walking to the door and exiting the room. Once Flora knew she was safe, she didn't hesitate and allowed her dam of tears to break. She buried her face in her arms to suppress any sound she made, and just cried freely, eventually exhausting herself into a near slumber. However, she stopped herself, fearing what may await her in slumber. Reliving her friend's final moments, what may have happened to her if she had been caught by that twisted mare, her friends being tortured gruesomely, and much more macabre nightmares that she feared won't be just a nightmare, but actually real. Just thinking about it made her skin crawl, so instead, she just tried to think of memories that she cherished. The moments in her short life that had rebuilt her after the horrors that Darwin Flare had caused her, and had shattered her already fragile psyche. It was hard for Flora to chew the crustless daffodil and daisy sandwich that had been prepared and plated by her mother for dinner that night due to her recently pulled tooth. It was one of her main teeth that she used to chew, so she had needed to improvise by moving her bites around her mouth to grind the food to a swallowable state. The bread was the easy part. It was mainly the two other occupants rested between the soft and delectable wheat slabs that gave her trouble. But, being headstrong and confident in any feat, she managed to beat the challenge by chewing the contents to small and sluggy pieces that could glide down her throat easily. Upon finishing her challenging meal, she raised her hooves into the air at her success, to which her mother seated to the left of her smiled. Flora was happy to see her mom smile, considering that things hadn't been the best lately. Lily had lost her job due to the company having to cut some employees, a job she had worked for over 10 years. It was a sad day for her, but just like any pony should, she let it go and moved on to figuring out a new plan to keep food on the table. She didn't even waste her breath on her husband, knowing it would only result in another beating and potential near death. That had happened 5 times in her 7 years of marriage, and out of fear for her life, just told the doctor some fake story of how she had gotten the many wounds and broken bones. It's not like they could do shit about it anyways, and Darwin knew that just as much as she did. Their relationship hadn't always been so strife-driven. It actually had started very happily and carefree, up until the day Lily had announced her pregnancy. That had caused a switch to flip in Darwin's head, and on several occasions had tried to kill Flora while she was still in the womb. He had had several opportunities, but for some reason had stopped at the very moment he could have, having laughed evilly in Lily's traumatized state and just said something along the lines of, "As long as you keep your mouth shut, this thing won't end up bleeding on the floor, and you won't end up in prison for murder." It's only for that very reason that Lily has never spoken a word or attempted to seek help, for Flora's safety. She could care less about her ending up in prison. As a mother, it's her job to protect her daughter no matter what, so she wore fake smiles to keep Flora safe and unaware of the horrid truth. She was truly miserable, but she'd take the hits and threats until some miracle saved her. Flora had heard the screaming and shouting, but she was too young to catch on, thinking it was just a natural thing Mommy and Daddy did. Lily's smile would only last until her daughter left the kitchen to go watch television or play in her room, watching as Flora slid her plate towards her own and took off to her room to play with her new dolls and playset she had gotten for her birthday 1 week prior. Upon the door to Flora's bedroom closing, Lily's fake smile turned back to a static expression of depression, fear, and misery. It wouldn't be long before Darwin walked through the door in a drunken state and the misery began, so she just did her best to eat her own dinner. She had just started to lift the sandwich when the door opened and unsteady hoofsteps entered the house. Lily wouldn't finish her dinner. She had a daughter to protect. The heavy scent of whiskey and body odor permeated the kitchen upon the sight of a very drunk Darwin Flare stumbling to the table. It was suffocating, but Lily knew if she said anything, she'd be in for a painful night. So she just composed herself and played happy wife.
Welcome home, darling. How was your day at work?
She faked.
Wouldn't you like to know? Where's my dinner, Lily? You'd best not be slacking.
He responded coldly. Lily gulped, getting up and quickly prepping the plate she had saved for him. Once the sandwich was prepared, she returned to the table and placed the plate before him, trying her best not to gag at the suffocating stench wafting from his body.
What the hell is this? This ain't no dinner. This is a fool's meal.
Lily gulped again.
I'm sorry, but we don't have any money to go out and buy things for a big meal. This is all I could manage.
She explained, her voice starting to shiver at the tone of his voice. Darwin wasn't listening, rising from the chair with clear anger. He then grabbed the plate and hurled it across the kitchen, shattering upon contact with the far wall and creating a big hole.
Go out and buy some real food, or things are going to be bad for you, Lily.
He growled. Lily was against the wall, frozen in fear, trying to think of another way out of this. She thought of the things in the pantry, piecing them together to try and come up with something to calm the raging stallion before her. Then, something else made her immediately panic, hearing the cry of her daughter's voice.
Mommy? Are you okay? Why is Daddy so mad?
Flora questioned with clear concern. Immediately, her motherly instincts kicked in, knowing she had to act.
Everything's fine, honey. Daddy just dropped his plate on accident. Nothing to worry about.
She assured in her best calm voice. It worked, up until something else replaced Flora's reason of concern.
Ew. What is that smell?
Flora asked, covering her muzzle to relieve her nostrils of the clear, pungent odor reeking from Darwin's entire body. Lily worked quickly, a solution coming to mind instantly.
Oh, Daddy had a little accident at work, and he got covered by some stinky stuff. He's going to shower tonight to get it off. Right, Daddy?
The closing statement came with a wink and clear tone of voice for Darwin to catch as a reminder to just agree with her. Darwin didn't catch it, too drunk to think logically, and instead formed a grin that spoke evil intent. Lily's heart instantly skipped a beat, knowing that for some reason, Darwin wasn't just following the usual protocol when Flora caught them fighting.
Absolutely. However, Daddy got something cool for you at work, honey.
He started, walking to the stove and working his hoof to the knife holder upon the counter.
Really, Daddy? What is it? What is it?
Flora exclaimed in excitement. Keeping the sight of his hoof sliding the largest knife from its home from his daughter, he continued to hold his devilish grin and play with her youthful naivety.
Oh, it's really cool. But you'll have to come over here to get it. It's a surprise.
He was absolutely serious, and Lily knew he wasn't just messing with her. The grin spoke his intent alone, and now she had to act before he could harm her. Flora was already on the pounce, so she knew it was do or die. Dropping every bit of her fear and paranoia of the stallion before her, she lunged at Darwin with all of her might, knocking him down instantly. He had been surprised at the attack, not having expected Lily to actually act, but he still had the knife, and she was far from having the advantage. A sharp, burning pain inflamed her left side, the knife having been stabbed into her flesh, causing her to scream, but her motherly instincts didn't let her fall, slamming her head down into Darwin's before he could get the knife out of her body for another stab. Darwin hadn't expected Lily to be so quick to act, his head being hit hard again and again, until he was to a state where he was too stunned. Lily saw that as her cue to escape, the knife still in her and her warm blood leaking onto the kitchen floor as much as Darwin's, his nose bleeding and broken from Lily's skull. Getting off of Darwin's body, she looked around for Flora, finding her in a shocked and horrified state.
Flora, come on, we need to go!
She demanded. Flora was still frozen at the sight, so she just proceeded to grab Flora, but stopped at a hard kick to her right set of ribs, knocking her to the floor and shifting the knife deeper into her body. The blade attacked her organs like a blazing fire, causing her to lose focus long enough for Darwin to get up and subdue Lily to a position where she couldn't fight back. His hooves then wrapped around Lily's neck and squoze with a force that was the equivalent of the strength of a boa constricting its prey. She choked and gasped for breath as Flora watched in horror, not knowing what to do. Lily attempted to yell out to Flora to run, but the force of Darwin's hooves was too much, and no matter how hard she tried to fight against it, Darwin only tightened his grip on her neck. Her lungs burned for air, but none came, and just as her vision started to blur to black, the pressure around her neck lifted. All of the air her lungs begged for returned, and she coughed as she attempted to breathe. Her vision was blurry, but through it, she could see Darwin in a hasty struggle. Then she saw his neck, something around it and holding on for dear life.
Get off me, you brat!
Darwin yelled, trying his best in his drunken state to unhinge the hooves wrapped around his neck. Flora had jumped onto him and grabbed his neck in an attempt to save her dying mother, clinging her small body to the entirety of his neck and holding on as if her life depended on it. And it did. He slammed against the counters and table to get his daughter off, his lungs begging for oxygen and blood blinding his vision. Plates fell from cabinets, pans collided to the floor, and the knife set met the floor as well, its occupants of several sizes being freed from their homes. Just as Darwin was close to losing consciousness, with a slam to the fridge, Flora lost her grip, her hooves having lost their strength. She fell hard onto her back on the glass-covered floor, immediately feeling the shards slice her flesh, but the pain was mute to her, more focused on her delusional monster of a father raging towards her with murderous intent. Before she could even back up, she was pinned, and her tiny neck was in a tight grip. Lily saw the horror through her blurry vision, but was too weak to interject the scene, still catching her breath and regaining her strength. Flora could see spots starting to fill her vision as she reached out for something in hopes of saving herself. She reached and reached, and through her little strength, found something on the kitchen floor. Without thinking and having only survival instinct as her drive, she gripped and attacked her father with whatever she had in her hoof, praying for her weapon to save her. It did. Flora had shoved one of the larger knives through the side of Darwin's neck and out the other side repetitively, causing warm blood to bathe her face and upper chest as her father let go to cut off the bloodline spraying from his neck with every beat of his racing heart. He fell from atop Flora and attempted to get up and run, but the amount of blood he was losing and his heart rate had forced him into shock, and he couldn't act. He choked and gurgled on his own blood on the floor as Flora attempted to catch her breath, unaware of what she had just done out of instinct of survival. When she had regained enough oxygen and could focus again, Darwin Flare was dead in a pool of blood, and Flora's response had only been a chaotic mix of sadness and guilt.
Daddy? Daddy!
She screamed in absolute chaos. Lily had recovered enough, and at the sight of Flora's mad cries for her dad to wake up and her innocence being shattered, she only cried and held her daughter in her hooves as the sounds of sirens could be heard approaching the house. Flora had killed her own father in defense of protecting herself, but that's not how Flora saw it. Too young to understand. From that moment, Flora's life had changed, and it would take a long time for her to understand that while she had killed her own father, it wasn't her fault. And only until she could understand that, Flora's first life would remain immobile. Up until the day she would meet Sarah Darkmist.